Over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Bev Turner. On GB News, we're live on your TV, radio and online, and we're here till midday with today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, expert guests and even our opinions.
Make sure you get in touch with us with your views as usual on gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the show, but first it's time for the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Unions and train operators have resumed their talks to try and resolve the dispute over pay and conditions. Tens of thousands of rail workers have walked off the job for the second time this week, causing major travel disruption across the country. 1 in 5 trains are running today, and they're mostly restricted to main lines. The government's already announced it's planning to change the law to allow agency staff to fill in for striking workers. The RMT's Assistant General Secretary John Leach told GB News the current offer needs to be improved.
I'm going in anticipation and hope that they're going to put a proper and decent offer on the table. But the thing is, let's talk about what is on the table. 2%, job insecurity, thousands of job cuts, ticket office closures, new contracts, fire and rehire. That's not on. They've got to have a complete reset. And more importantly, probably than anything else, the government have got to get behind the railway men and women of this country and resource and give the authority to the management to negotiate a fair deal.
Well, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng says there is a fair offer on the table.
People who are striking, preventing kids from taking exams, preventing people from getting to work, should really actually look at what they're doing and actually, I think, come to some sort of reasonable arrangement. I don't think it's the case that the government has been unreasonable. I think the strikers are the ones who are being unreasonable.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is at London Waterloo Station for us. Paul, what's the latest? Unsurprisingly, looking pretty quiet there where you are.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Rhiannon. The latest is that it seems like people are continuing to work from home. It's been very quiet here at Waterloo Station today. Only 20% of trains are running both here and across the UK. Difference between today and Tuesday, of course, is that on Tuesday there was a tube strike as well, so really difficult to get across the capital. Today the tube is running, so it's much busier than usual, one would imagine. Also people taking the bus or getting on a bicycle or even by foot, which should be interesting later when they're coming home, as there are thunderstorms forecast for the south of England and the capital. Interesting to see how people feel about the strike then when they're having to walk home in the rain. But as you say, the dispute ongoing. Doesn't seem to be any signs of a breakthrough at the moment. If we're looking for signs of optimism, though, Merseyrail up in Liverpool yesterday struck a deal with the union, the TSSA, for a 7.1% increase in pay there. So it shows that when it comes to negotiations between the rail companies and the unions, it can be done. But at the moment, the RMT holding strong on that line. and they won't discuss pay until that notice of redundancies is withdrawn from the table.
Paul, thank you. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter from a very quiet London Waterloo there. The Prime Minister has hit back at critics of his plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, describing their attitude as condescending. Boris Johnson's now arrived in the capital, Kigali, for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. He's due to hold talks with the Prince of Wales, who's also in Rwanda, after he reportedly described the policy as appalling. The Prime Minister is expected to announce new trade deals and investment initiatives during his trip. 2 British men who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine are reportedly preparing to appeal their death sentences. Ada Naslin, Sean Pinner and Moroccan national Brahim Sadoun were convicted by a Russian-backed court in the breakaway region of Donetsk. Sean Pinner's lawyer says if the appeal is dismissed, they'll request clemency. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has accused Russia of weaponising hunger with its blockade of Ukrainian grain. In Turkey, Liz Truss said if issues aren't resolved within a month, the global impact will be huge. She says the UK and Turkey will work together to get the grain out of Ukraine.
This is a moment for strength, for commitment and unity. The United Kingdom and Turkey are working closely together to mitigate the consequences of Russia's war against Ukraine. This has to start with getting Ukraine's grain out. We cannot and we will not rest until Ukraine prevails.
Afghan authorities are still struggling to reach a remote area after yesterday's earthquake, which killed at least 1,000 people. 1,500 others were injured as the 6.1 magnitude quake struck, destroying homes in the eastern part of the country. It's the deadliest earthquake to hit Afghanistan in 2 decades. The United Nations is calling for financial aid and urging world leaders to provide humanitarian support. Voters are heading to the polls for by-elections in both West Yorkshire and Devon today. The vote in Wakefield was triggered by the resignation of Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan after he was convicted of sexually assaulting a boy. In Tiverton and Honiton, Tory MP Neil Parish quit after admitting he watched pornography in Parliament. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though it's back to Mercy and Bev with To The Point.
Very good morning to you. It's 10:07 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Bev Turner. We've got a great show ahead. Here's what's coming up.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, where he's expected to highlight the benefits of the Commonwealth and meet with Prince Charles for the first time after he reportedly hit out the government's Rwandan migrant plan. We'll be looking ahead to find out what's taking place at the meeting.
Yes, and there is further widespread disruption today as talks failed to stop more rail strikes. The RMT trade union, which represents rail, maritime and transport workers, has accused Transport Secretary Grant Shapps of wrecking negotiations. While with the country facing disruption well into the end of the week, we'll ask what's needed to break the strike deadlock.
And racially and religiously aggravated offences recorded by police in England and Wales seem to have hit a new high last year. That's according to data from police forces. But are these figures an accurate reflection of what's actually taking place across the country? We'll be discussing this in more detail later on the show with a former Met policeman and our very own Inia Folarin Emanan.
Yes, well, we have all of that coming up and much more. I'm sure she'll forgive you.
Okay,
much more across the programme, and you can get in touch as usual with your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. We will get to as many of those as we can. But first, Bev gives her views on Brexit 6 years on.
So today marks the 6th anniversary of the Brexit referendum. I was hosting a phone-in radio show at the time. And although the mainstream press would have had us believe that we would never dare vote against our predominantly pro-Remain political establishment, I was in no doubt that you, the public, felt differently. So when I woke up that day and heard the news that we had indeed cut ties with Europe, I was saddened but not surprised. I say saddened because I felt then, in my gut, that being part of such an influential club was beneficial. There was strength in numbers, it felt. With China and parts of Asia swelling into ever greater global superpowers, I believed it felt as though we would be vulnerable alone in trade, security, laws around business regulation that protected employees and made us keep our beaches clean, stuff like that. I no longer feel like that. Overwhelmingly, I felt that I'd like my children to grow up on a continent where they would be free to travel unencumbered, interrailing this summer after exams. But of course, a Wuhan-born virus appeared and every country tore up the notion of free travel, even for healthy young people, with the EU leading the world into more and more inhumane restrictions. I remember getting a call from a tearful friend in Barcelona who had to take her 14-year-old daughter for an mRNA injection she didn't want, just so they could go out to their local restaurants. And boy, has the EU taken COVID and used it to force through technological tracking apps to a new level. Now, the EU Digital Services Act, which will regulate everything from what they call dark patterns and algorithms online. Unlike prior voluntary standards, this DSA has real teeth, power to pose huge fines on platforms and search engines, from a centralised governance exclusively supervised by the European Commission instead of the country of origin. But if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it's that one person's misleading information is another person's fact. There's a crisis response protocol in the Act, which empowers the European Commission to declare a state of emergency and require content removal, political propaganda tinkering by any other name. And how proud they are of their digital green certificate. Not a COVID certificate, of course, although it is based upon your vaccine status, but green because it was never going to end there. What organisation of control would give up such powers? Note the word green. One might even speculate that the next phase of lockdown culture will be to save the planet by dictating where and when citizens can move. Now imagine if we were still part of the EU, we would already be beholden to such an intrusive surveillance nightmare. But thanks to public pressure, our own government took down the page from their website recently, I don't know whether you saw it, advertising for someone to roll out our own COVID pass, so watch this space. But I always think that when the facts change, change your mind. And I, like many previous Remainers, very much have.
So you're a bit of a convert. Would you consider yourself a convert?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I can.
How about you? I don't know. Were you in support of Brexit?
I initially wasn't. For me, the status quo is probably always the safest option to go with. Naturally, that's what I'm like as a person with everything. But eventually, I absolutely was won round to the arguments for Brexit. And for me, it was really that independence and that sovereignty, because I really do believe that nations have to be sovereign, and they have the people elected to govern the country have to have the supremacy to govern the country, which is why, again, I've spoken out against this ECHR decision, for example. And look, I was never in any doubt that there would be complications, and it was a big risk, a constitutional risk, as well as an economic risk. But ultimately, I think I'll look back and say the country probably made the right decision, and it was the biggest vote ever democratically in the UK. So, you know, it was a very legitimate vote.
You know, it's hard to disentangle, isn't it, the economic effects of Brexit, of course, with the COVID pandemic. But so in some ways, no side on this debate can say categorically this was right or this was wrong. But as I say, my opinion of the EU and the muscle and the power that it has to make sweeping changes that may not benefit this country, that's been evident in the last 2 years.
I would absolutely agree with that. Well, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. What did you vote in the referendum 6 years on, can you believe? And do you regret it? Do you see the benefits of Brexit at the moment? Or do you think actually it's too soon to tell, given what we've been through the last couple of years? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But let's go to our top story this morning. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
He's expected to hold talks with Prince Charles today, the first time the two have met following the Prince of Wales' private comments, calling the government's Rwanda migrant plan appalling.
That's reportedly, anyway. The Prime Minister is expected to use the summit to promote the economic benefits of the Commonwealth. And joining us now to discuss this further is Bill Bowkett, political reporter for Reaction. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. What is the purpose of this meeting that takes place every 2 years?
So the purpose of the Heads of Commonwealth meeting is for the 54 heads of government to come together to express their shared goals of prosperity, democracy and peace. And whenever it happens, there's always different priorities that's come about. So for this year, the big focus is around food security caused by the war in Ukraine, as well as climate change. And because the Commonwealth has such a plethora of diversity with many of these countries coming from impoverished nations in Africa, that's going to be quite a big focus. Trade as well is going to be on the agenda, especially for the UK. The Commonwealth contributes 9% of trade, and especially, as Bev just said in her monologue there, about post-Brexit Britain having to strike out trade deals is going to be massive, and the Commonwealth seen as an amplifier of that. And then the other will be the pandemic, of course, and around vaccine inequalities. So lots of the agenda during the next few days.
And it's coincidental, isn't it, that this is happening in Rwanda off the back of, obviously, the government's asylum seeker plan to house migrants there. What do you think? How do you think that will change the dynamic? We, of course, know Prince Charles has reportedly said the Rwanda plan is appalling. Boris Johnson, this will be the first time he's meeting Prince Charles since those supposed comments. How do you think that will shape things?
The relationship between the UK and Rwanda is really interesting. Rwanda isn't actually, or was a member, part of the British Empire. It joined the Commonwealth in 2009. And Boris Johnson seems to have quite a close relationship with their leader, Paul Kagame. And I think on the side of Rwanda and on Kigali, that they're looking to kind of showcase, how it's developed since the 1994 genocide, and to kind of debunk any reports about its human rights abuses and Prince Charles's comments about the Rwanda scheme being appalling. But of course, this meeting between Boris Johnson and the Prince of Wales is going to grab all the headlines. It seems that if and when Rwanda, the specific policy to send asylum seekers to the country, we can expect Number 10 to defend it vigorously, to say how it's going to end the horrid trade, people smuggling trade, how it's going to deter migrants from crossing the channel dangerously. And I think it's important to stress that the two do have agreements, especially on the issue of global warming. But given how outspoken Charles is, and kind of shows about what it's going to be like when he does become our new, king, our new head of state, it'll be really interesting to see if any briefings come out of that particular meeting.
OK, thank you very much, Bill there. Bill Bowkett from Political Reporter from Reaction. Tom Harwood has joined us. Tom, listening to Bill there, this is as Mercy said, it's a coincidental timing. This isn't something that has been quickly put in the diary.
No.
Because of Rwanda.
Exactly. This has been in the diary for a very, very long time.
It's delayed because of COVID, in fact.
Exactly, by 2 years.
But it's like everybody on this trip is using it for their own PR aim, isn't it? Everybody has something to get from it. Just talk us through that. What's in it for the Prime Minister? What does Prince Charles want to come out of it, and Rwanda itself?
Well, it's so interesting. Of course, the Prime Minister has been wanting to sort of beef up the UK's role within the Commonwealth as almost this, not quite alternative to the EU, because of course it's not a trading organisation. It doesn't have a single market. It's not a similar organisation in that way, but it is an association of countries that tries to push shared values. And of course, the United Kingdom does try to sort of have that soft power within this organisation, but also there are some really exciting growth markets within these countries in the Commonwealth, some of the fastest growing countries in the world, and having greater business ties with these countries will no doubt be good economically. But also, of course, Rwanda, that partnership that has been announced this year is something that's really key to the Prime Minister's policy agenda. So he'll be wanting to cement that partnership there and also get across the idea that this is a country with which the United Kingdom can do business. Now, for Prince Charles, this is also a bit of a tricky situation because, of course, his comments, there's debate as to whether or not they were deliberately leaked. That's a big debate to be had over whether the royal family is trying to seem sort of more liberal, one might say, in order to preserve itself for future generations. But of course, the royal family has the Commonwealth it holds it in such great esteem. And so to be seen to some extent to disparage a country like Rwanda was a tricky thing to do. So there's a tightrope there for the prince to walk.
I guess he would say he wasn't disparaging the country, maybe, but he was disparaging the policy and the way that we might be looking to treat human beings.
Well, exactly. But I suppose in so doing, what you say is if you say that a policy to send someone to Rwanda is appalling, what are you saying about Rwanda in that sense? What are you saying about the quality of life someone in Rwanda might have? So there is that slight awkward situation there. But of course, the Prime Minister is meeting the Prince of Wales during this trip and clearly trying to paper over what has been a testy relationship.
And how long is this trip going to last and what are we going to see?
So this trip goes through to the weekend, to the end of the weekend, and it's just the start of a series of trips. First, so the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, as it's slightly clunkily known. And then the Prime Minister flies from there off to Bavaria in Germany for the G7 meetings. Now, these stretch through until the middle of next week. And then after that, he's off to Madrid, straight from Bavaria to Madrid for the NATO conference, where clearly there's going to be a lot to discuss about the security of Europe in a way that previous years of NATO meetings haven't had, the immediate security of war in Europe. On the agenda. So really, really busy diplomatic calendar for the Prime Minister over the next 2 weeks.
Interesting. And you will be bringing us all of the detail, Tom, as usual.
We will try to be, and indeed, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is there in Rwanda with the Prime Minister, so we'll be seeing some more from him later today.
I can't wait for that insight. That's what we've been desperate for, isn't it? Some
I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Pictures.
Where Boris Johnson meets
Charles.
Yeah.
Well, I do wonder how much of it will be public. Will we know anything?
We'll get pictures. We'll get introductory remarks, no doubt. But the actual conversation will be behind closed doors.
I'm probably quite right too.
Yes, well, that's it there for Rwanda. We're just going to take a short break. And after the break, we're talking about those rail strikes. 80% of train services across the country are once again cancelled today as the strikes continue. And our reporters are still up and down the country to give you the latest on that. So join us in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. The time's 10:25, and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, attempts to get Britain's railways back on track and prevent strike action failed last night, with rail workers walking out this morning for the second time this week.
Yes, the RMT trade union accused the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps of wrecking negotiations. And the biggest rail strike by railway workers in 30 years continues today, with 80% of services expected to be cancelled around Britain.
After the break,
yes.
Racially and...
We are going to go to our reporter Anna Riley, who I believe is in Hull. Anna Riley there. Sorry, we lost you for a second. Anna, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning. Yes, I'm here in Hull on the second day of strike action here. Hull is one of the worst affected cities by the strike action, and the station is shut down for the 3 days of strike action. I'm joined here by Gaz Jackson. He is the lead RMT organiser for Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. It's the second day of the strikes, Gaz. Is it affecting, it's affecting people, but is it doing what you hope it to be doing?
Well, what we need the government to come out from behind the curtains and speak to the train operating companies and Network Rail to get this sorted. Our members are willing to stand out on the picket line as long as it takes, because we've seen that the Network Rail want to get rid of 3,000 safety critical workers. That means the railway is not going to be safe.
And what sort of response have you been getting? Obviously, people have either had to cancel their journeys, work from home, find other modes of transport, but people have been pipping as you've gone by at the picket line here. So is that support there from the public, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The public have been absolutely brilliant behind us. We've had donations to buy us drinks and stuff along the picket lines as well. And we do sympathise with the people that have had to change their plans. But ultimately, I think most people understand why we're doing this. It's for the safety of the railway and maintaining people's jobs. People have been talking about we're greedy because we want a pay rise. Well, our members have not had a pay rise for 3 years. And it's about time that we did. Every Thursday, our members got a clap because there was key workers. But that doesn't pay the bills.
And you said you're prepared for this to go on. Obviously, it's scheduled the next day, Saturday, but you're thinking it could go on and on.
Well, we've got a 6 months mandate for this industrial action, so if we need to, we'll reballot our members, and I'm sure we'll get a yes vote in the same kind of percentages that we have done in this time. We don't want to have to be doing this. We're calling on the government to come and sort this mess out, because ultimately they hold the key to the door. They're in charge of Network Rail, and they're in control of the train operating companies, so it's their responsibility to get back round the table with our general secretaries and get this mess sorted out.
And you're here, I believe, till 12 o'clock this afternoon. I don't know if we can see here, we've got sort of a gathering of members here that are all involved, so a turnout really.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've been travelling around the north of England within Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, and every picket line we've been to, it's been absolutely fantastically supported by the members. I think the government have very much misjudged this. Our members are fully behind the strike, and we'll do what we need to do.
Thank you, Gaz. Thank you for speaking with me. And yes, we will be here all day reporting on the rail strike here in Hull and bring you updates as we have them.
Thank you, Anna. We look forward to receiving those updates. Another day of disruption for people up and down the country. 20% of services are still running, but not going to be very useful if you're
How
not
was
one
your
of those.
journey in today?
It was fun. I left a lot earlier. I drove in. I usually take the train in. I made sure to beat the morning rush hour, so it was smooth sailing, but it's still, if you're driving into London, you have to find parking, pay for parking, it's quite a faff, isn't it?
It is a faff. I actually thought the roads would be quieter today. I thought it's a Thursday, sunny Thursday, people will work from home. Not in London. The roads were absolutely bumper to bumper. My journey is about 4 miles or so, and I think it took me about 80 minutes. Wow. I know you're going to message and say, why didn't you cycle, Bev?
Well, we had a
Don't
guest
do
on
that.
last week, didn't he? Who wanted you to cycle with your kids in the back of the...
I know, poor guy.
I'm
sure. No, but, you know, when you're travelling into work and you need a laptop and you need your rucksack, you need all your stuff, I'm not going to cycle. So we had no choice. I couldn't get the tube in. What do you do? We're all having to make accommodations.
Absolutely.
I have to say, I do think there is... I mean, I know it's controversial, but I do think there is an argument to say that we're living in an environment where our massive corporations have so much power at the moment and the individual workers on 0 hour... I know these guys aren't on 0 hours contracts. You could say they're actually doing all right. But I think we have to think that maybe they might have a point of...
What, in terms of striking? Yeah, I mean, I think the frustration that people are facing because of the disruption is probably making them less sympathetic. But you know, people have a right to strike and think it's a fundamental right.
I agree.
And not all of them are well paid. We keep quoting sort of average figures, but some of them are not very well paid at all. So I do get it, I do, but I'm not sure I feel strongly necessarily about supporting the strikes.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to what you think. Kenneth has got in touch about the strikes. He says, the RMT union make me so angry. They were supported to the tune of £16 billion during the pandemic to ensure the jobs remained after the lockdowns ended. They're now holding the country to ransom with unrealistic demands. They need to realise the country's struggling after a 2-year lockdown. Their behaviour is disgusting.
It's you know what they need to... I mean, they've had all this money, like you say. It's not as though these companies aren't profitable. They are extremely profitable. I imagine the shareholders have done very well out of that £16 billion they received. Brexit, I did my little monologue at the top about Brexit. Happy Independence Day, everyone, says Paul. Thank you, Paul. 6 years ago today, we changed the country for the better, and it's still very funny that some people are still angry about Brexit and still rant. Margaret says Brexit was the best thing for this country. As time's gone on, I feel more strongly about that. Well, that's what I said as well, Margaret.
Yeah, lots of you saying you don't regret it, but Ken here says Brexit has still not been achieved properly. Until we rip up the ECHR and introduce our own Bill of Rights, we'll constantly be overruled by unelected court in Brussels. Of course, the ECHR isn't in Brussels, but I see what you mean there, and it's not part of the EU, really.
But I really want to understand, Mercy, and if anybody can help it, you know, we've got this massive labour shortage in the UK at the moment. We've got all of these jobs which nobody's filling, and if you wanted to leave the EU, it is very easy. It's a very low bar to say, well, they all went back to Europe and now we've got no one to make our coffee. I don't know whether that's true or not. That's what I need, because, of course, what happened during COVID, there were a lot of people who had originally been born within EU countries who took their furlough money. They said, thanks very much, I'll take that, or I'll take a loan and I'll go home and I'll take my money, and then they've just not come back. I do think that's muddied the waters.
Yeah, I mean, COVID has definitely, changed everything we're speaking about today, whether it's the rail strikes, whether it's Brexit. It has all been interrupted, hasn't it, by COVID. So... And lots of money was defrauded, I suppose. The taxpayer was defrauded by a lot of money. But keep getting in touch. Yeah, 5 billion. Keep getting in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk with your views on everything we're discussing today. But after the break, apparently racially and religiously aggravated offences recorded by police in England have hit a fresh high in 2021. But are these figures truly reflective of what's happening? We'll discuss that at the start of this morning's headlines.
Good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Unions and train operators have resumed their talks to try and resolve the dispute over pay and conditions. Tens of thousands of rail workers have walked off the job for the second time this week, causing major travel disruption across the country. 1 in 5 trains are running today, and they're mostly restricted to main lines. The RMT's Assistant General Secretary John Leach told GB News the current offer needs to be improved.
Let's talk about what is on the table. 2%, job insecurity, thousands of job cuts, ticket office closures, new contracts, fire and rehire. That's not on. They've got to have a complete reset. And more importantly, probably than anything else, the government have got to get behind the railway men and women of this country and resource and give the authority to the management to negotiate a fair deal.
Well, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng insists there is a fair offer on the table.
People who are striking, preventing kids from taking exams, preventing people from getting to work, should really actually look at what they're doing and actually, I think, come to some sort of reasonable arrangement. I don't think it's the case that the government has been unreasonable. I think the strikers are the ones who are being unreasonable.
The Prime Minister, who's arrived in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, has hit back at critics of his plan to send asylum seekers to the country, describing their attitude as condescending. He's due to hold talks with the Prince of Wales after he reportedly described the policy as appalling. The Prime Minister is also expected to announce new trade deals and investment initiatives during his trip. Two British men who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine are reportedly preparing to appeal their death sentences. Aidan Aslan, Sean Pinner and Moroccan national Brahim Sadoun were convicted by a Russian-backed court in the breakaway region of Donetsk. Sean Pinner's lawyer says if the appeal is dismissed, they'll request clemency. TV Online and DAB+ Radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.221 and 1.159 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,502 and 13 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It is 10:38. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Moroki on GB News. I thought it was your turn. We're live on TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now racially and religiously aggravated offences recorded by police forces in England and Wales hit a new high in 2021, according to new data.
That's right, a total of 76,884 precisely racially and religiously aggravated offences were recorded, which is up 15% on the year before.
Yes, but the Metropolitan Police recorded the highest number of these offences last year with over 15,000, followed by West Midlands with just over 8,000 and then Greater Manchester with 6,500, while a spokesman for the police, Metropolitan Police that is, said, quote, "We take reports of hate crime seriously and record all instances, whether they pass the threshold to be classified as a crime or not." What a load of... Anyway, let's continue.
Oh, I want to know what you think about this. So joining us now is GB News' Culture and Social Affairs editor, Anaya Folarin Iman. Good morning, Anaya. Give us some meat on the bones of this story. Why has it hit the headlines today and what is it all about?
It's what you mentioned in the introduction. There's been record numbers of recorded racially and religiously aggravated offences. It's quite a mouthful.
I'm glad it's not just me falling over my words this morning.
And it's been increased 15% from the year previously. And it has been on the increase, the recorded offences, since 2013. Now, the police have a range of different reasons for that. Some of the reasons, as West Yorkshire Police, for example, acknowledge that there has been an improvement in the way that it's recorded. So it is very simple to record, and I think that that's quite an important factor. So regardless of if there is evidence or it's been investigated or anyone's been charged, for example, I can put in a form or fill in a form online and that will be recorded on the statistics. So some critics might say that because it is so easy, that these statistics could be easily inflated. But other reasons, for example, the police would say that it has been a spike from their own data when it comes to quite high-profile events, such as the Euro football, also the opening of the lockdown following the pandemic and so on. So they would argue that in terms of intense moments of politics, there's also been an increase. But I think it is very difficult to draw huge conclusions from the statistics, because many people would say, well, it would be strange to see as a society where we've become much more aware of racism and discrimination and are creating a more tolerant society, that actually hate towards religious and ethnic minorities would be on the increase since 2013. It seems kind of quite counterintuitive. We would assume it would be decreasing. So I think that looking at many of the different forces and looking at many campaigners, it does seem that a lot of this is just due to increased reporting.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I'm always extremely cynical when it comes to things like this, which is you can't say on other channels, other news outlets, can you? Because it's assumed that, OK, these are police-recorded hate crimes, and they must be true. But as we've just heard, I mean, they're not even crimes in some of the cases. They're just reported. Yeah. But the other thing is, in a previous life, I was very much into statistics. I studied statistics for my master's, and a part of it. And I trust properly done surveys that take a nationally representative sample of the population. And according to that, so there's this gold standard, which is the Crime Survey of England and Wales, which we're talking about tens of thousands of samples, representative samples. And according to that, 38% decrease for all hate crimes over the last 10-ish years, 12 years. So this seems a bit dubious. Of course, if you keep telling people there's all this racism about, if you tell them about microaggressions, then of course they're going to think suddenly they need to report this, that and the other as a race hate crime.
So help me understand this then, ladies, because racism does still exist.
Yes, we can all agree on that.
We can all agree that there are certain situations in which people of colour will be prejudiced against, right? Or whatever the language you prefer to use. So how do you distinguish, therefore, between a genuine crime which is committed because somebody is driven by hatred for a particular demographic, culture, race, however you want to describe that individual?
So I think that the point that Mercy made about the fact that there is a huge spectrum which comes under this hate crime, I think is quite a key point. So it can be from someone saying something that you might perceive of as offensive, saying something that you don't like, all the way to kind of common assault, which is already a crime, when we know that if you harass somebody, if you actually assault them, that is already comes under the crime. And I think some of the challenges that people that oppose a lot of the way that hate crime is recorded is the way that it's become very subjective. So if you just say that you find something offensive and that you think that that is racist, that is instantly recorded as a hate crime or a hate incident. And that means that the balance is often in the side of those who perceive themselves to be a victim. And oftentimes now, since 2013 and so on, we do have social media. And so people can say all sorts of things on social media. And if you report that to the police, that could be recorded as a hate incident. So that leaves the door open to so much interpretation, so much scope. And that makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, my mum, this would have been about 2 years ago now, she had gone into a shop, she left her bike outside, her bike got stolen. No idea who it was who stole her bike, obviously. They went off with it. If she had wanted to, she could have gone to the police and said, my bike's been stolen, I think it's because I'm a black woman. She could have, she obviously didn't because she's not a moron, but she didn't do that, but she could have done, and then that would have been recorded as a hate crime. Somebody's done it because the person perceived them to be doing it for racial reasons. That's how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
Surely that's no way to run
Just a quick point on that, because I do think that there is a worry as well at a time when we have seen an increase in burglary and violent crime across the country, that police resources are increasingly being diverted to what seems to be, for a lot of people, relatively minor issues. So, for example, in 2017, Sadiq Khan opened an online hate crime hub, which cost £1.7 million. And in 2 years, it only convicted 6 trolls, and none of them were even given a prison sentence. So there is a sense that a lot of money is being wasted on these hate crime incidents that actually aren't real crimes in a meaningful sense.
Well, this one of the articles here discusses Assistant Chief Constable Osman Khan of West Yorkshire Police commented on this and he said, "We record every hate incident, whether it passes the threshold to be classified as a crime or not."
Yeah.
Just what you were saying, and have worked. What does that even mean? We've worked very closely with partners to campaign and actively encourage victims to come forward and make reports to the police. By encouraging reporting of hate crime, people now have the confidence to tell us about incidents where the suspect cannot even be identified, for example, in some online abuse cases.
Yeah.
This makes me so angry. This is obviously politically motivated. You can see why if you, not to pick on any particular parties, but I do it anyway, if you are, for example, in a left-leaning constituency and you're an MP there or you're a police and crime commissioner there, I am being careful because there are elections there today, but if you do live in a place where there's a left-wing PCC, Police and Crime Commissioner, you might be motivated to encourage people to report more incidents of hate crime. So you can sort of say, look, there's so much hate, because that narrative
themselves as the solution.
Yeah,
as
and
well
that narrative,
they
feed off that narrative. So many left-wing parties feed off that narrative that there's all this racism, there's all this hate crime, there's all this religious crime and race crime going on in society. So it's in their interest, I think, and I know that sounds cynical, but it's in their interest to make it seem like racism in society is so much more prevalent than it is.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point. I think many critics do argue that there is a growing industry that are essentially invested in the idea that we are living in a very racist, intolerant society, when actually when you look at a lot of the statistics, all social attitude surveys, long-term social attitude surveys, show that racism is in long-term decline. And so there is a worry that actually these statistics actually inflame tensions and cause anxiety for ethnic minority and religious minorities when actually society is increasingly tolerant.
I mean, we saw an increase in violent crime when we came out of lockdowns kind of last year. Hardly surprising, really, given the mindset of a lot of people who struggled with those periods of being alone and not being able to live in society. And some of the accusations in this report being that violent crimes were committed with a racist undercurrent. But I guess what we're saying is what's so difficult is to separate what is that just somebody being violent, drunk, or being an idiot, and to what extent they are actually going out looking to beat up a Muslim, because it's religion as well, it's not just race, or a black person.
And now a final question, if I may. Tell me if you don't want to answer this. But how many years have you lived in this country? Were you born in this country?
Yeah, I was born.
Okay, so 26 years?
25.
25 years. How many times would you say you've encountered something that is definitely racism, that was definitely racially motivated?
Yeah, so I would say twice in my whole life, interestingly. So one time I was actually called the N-word on the street. You know, someone was driving and shouted the N-word. And to be honest, I kind of pitied the person, to be honest. I kind of thought, what an embarrassment. I didn't see it as a kind of reflection of a society that's out to get me. I think that people say abusive things. You know, someone could have picked on, you know, what someone looks like, their weight and so on. I do think that there is, you know, a worry that people are encouraged to internalise this and to shape how they view themselves in a really fundamental sense. I don't think it has to be that way. Does that happen, Rob?
I do wonder if it's generational as well, because I love talking to you two, because you do see this quite differently, being in your 20s, I think, than friends of mine who are black in their 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
They still are very much committed to eradicating racist discrimination, which we all are.
Yeah.
However, what I hear when I hear you two talk is this idea that don't make me the victim.
No, but
don't tell me I'm a victim.
We're a minority in Io and I. Are definitely a minority in our generation.
Yeah, but I think the generational point is an important point, because I do think that there is a reluctance to actually see that we have come a long way as a society.
Oh, we have.
Yeah, and I think
No
that
doubt.
people really want to believe that it is still the 1970s where people were having kind of bricks thrown into their buildings, and that some happens, but very rarely. And overwhelmingly, things have become much more positive for ethnic minority people in Britain.
Good, let's hope so.
Well, twice in 25 years. Mine's probably about that twice, maybe 3 times in 21 years I've lived in this country. I'm older than 21. I wasn't born in this country. So
You're
that's quite a good ratio, isn't it? I mean, it's a pretty good ratio. You can't expect, you know, I don't think that's bad. That surely shows that if you're not out looking for it all the time, perhaps it's just not there.
Well, I would agree with that, but some might disagree.
Or it's there, but you choose how to handle it. It's there, but you choose whether to become a victim of it or to be empowered to make a change for your generation.
Absolutely. Well, Inaya, thank you very much for joining us. Really interesting discussion there. I'm sure you have lots of views on that, so get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But let's move on.
OK, so a row over sex education in schools is taking place in Scotland, with a new poll suggesting that pupils think their health and wellbeing lessons are a waste of time.
Yes, according to research by parents' organisation Connect, a majority of children and young people disagree the classes are interesting, relevant and useful, or have no clear opinion on their quality at all.
My kids feel like that about maths and English. So how do we make sex education relevant and interesting? Is it even something we should be teaching in schools? Or should it be left to the parents? Get in touch and let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yes, well, joining us now to discuss this in more detail is Ian Henderson, CEO and founder of The Naked Truth, which is a campaign group that helps teach healthy relationships in school. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, I remember, I would have been in year 6, I think. I remember my sex education class. It was some random woman putting a condom over a banana or something.
It didn't work in your case, did it?
Well, it didn't work. I was pregnant at 18, so there you go. Sorry, Mum. But anyway, so that's obviously not the riveting stuff, is it? How do you make sex education more engaging for children?
Well, I mean, Naked Truth, we focus particularly on the issue of pornography. And that's one of the things that we're really passionate about, bringing education and just trying to inform young people to think about and consider. And even that, I think, in itself is probably an answer to your question, because perhaps young people think they do know something about sex or not. But what I think we definitely know is that young people are engaging with pornography, which obviously in itself is sex education. And the worrying thing about that is that the kind of sex education young people will be getting from pornography is often violent, often abusive, certainly misogynistic. And so one of the things that I would say is we want to be talking about these kind of conversations. We want to be talking about things like consent. We want to be talking about things like pornography. Yes, things like contraception are also really important. But actually, I wonder whether some of it is the topic of things like consent, things like pornography, which are the issues that young people are dealing with, experiencing. That is their lived experience. They are, without question, being exposed to pornography. And so that's, I think, where you start. You start by talking about the very things that young people are actually engaged with.
What age, Ian, do you think it's appropriate to start having those conversations? My youngest is 11. So she's at the age now of sort of asking questions. Is that about age appropriate, year 6?
Well, I think we would say we work in schools, face-to-face with schools. We're mostly in high schools, so that sort of 11 to 18 age bracket. We are having more primary schools saying, is there something that we could be doing with year 6? Because those teachers are saying, we know that this is being discussed amongst pupils themselves. You know, pupils are sharing links. They're showing each other things on their phones. I think that's a big one. You know, if you feel that your child is old enough to have their own phone, then probably they're old enough to begin to have an age-appropriate conversation about something like pornography, because, you know, it is the way in which people engage with pornography. So, for example, MindGeek, which is the company that owns the biggest porn sites, they very recently were quoted to say that in 2020, each month across their platforms, they had 4.5 trillion visits a month. So that's how accessible porn has become. It isn't just like that top shelf stuff anymore. We all know that. It is something that lives very much online and very much is accessible anytime, anywhere on something like a phone. And so if we're putting a phone in the hands of our young people and our children, then we also perhaps need to be having those age-appropriate conversations. And I think schools have a part to play in that as well. I think it is something parents need to do. And again, as an organisation, Naked Truth, we try to equip and support parents as well as teaching schools.
Ian,
but
I always
think together, schools and parents can talk about this even at the age of 11, 12.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I always thought, oh, my children will talk to me about everything. And then you realise they get to the age when if you try and talk to them about sex, like, oh, Mum, shut up. They just go away.
Sure.
I just don't. What tips do you have for us parents who want to broach the subject in a way so we know that they can ask us questions?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think one of the things that we want to try and do if we can is start a conversation as early as we can. And again, what we don't want to be doing, say, with a 7-year-old is going into the kind of details of sex or what porn looks like. But what we can be doing, even at a younger age, is having conversations where we can be saying, listen, if you saw something online, even when you're just messing around, and it felt a bit weird or a bit strange, it's okay to come and talk to me about that. You're not going to get in trouble if you do that. So even creating the environment where it's safe to talk about something is important. I think that would be a major tip.
Sure. Well, that's great advice, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about that important issue. Ian Henderson there, CEO and founder of The Naked Truth. That was a good question, I thought, because I don't really know how to speak to my daughter.
You're not there yet.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yes,
thank God I'm not. Yeah, she's 7, so
you're nearly there.
Yeah, I am, and I'm
Pick
quite
your
scared
words.
about
It's
that.
all about the words you use,
Well,
the language.
Keep all your thoughts coming into us on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll be back after this short break with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views. See you in a minute.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A hot one for some today. Downpours in other places. Hit and miss thunderstorms developing through the day today, particularly across England and Wales. Weather front up to the far north, but it's actually this one approaching from France that's bringing more clouds and some heavy showers. We've already seen a few, but we're going to see more of them developing this afternoon as the heat really gets going, particularly over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast initially, but spreading into Wales and then later on into northern England. Southwest England also susceptible to some heavy downpours. Hit and miss, so not everywhere seeing them, far from it, but where they do occur, torrential rain, large hail likely. The highest temperatures today across northern England, North Wales, could get close to 30 Celsius. Mostly dry for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a bit of cloud here, but some sunny spells coming through. And then through the evening, the chance of those thundery showers working further north. So we'll see more of them this evening over northern England, spreading into parts of Scotland. Some heavy rain likely here through the night. So downpours further south tending to ease. Quite a warm, quite a humid night. Quite a lot of cloud around as well, but misty in places. And generally a cloudier day on Friday with a continued risk of some showers. The overnight ones clearing away from northern Scotland, but we'll see more developing, I think, during tomorrow, particularly over the Midlands, southwest England, but also moving up into northeast England during the afternoon. Again, not everywhere seeing the downpours, but there will be some heavy ones around, the risk of hail and thunder. In the sunny spells, mid-20s across the east, but turning cooler further west with more persistent rain for Northern Ireland, moving in by the end of Friday. Wales and southwest England seeing some heavy rain for a time late on Friday as well. And that line of rain is a cold front which swings across all areas, tied into this area of low pressure, which will bring plenty of showers in western areas this weekend and a much cooler feel, with particularly across Northern Ireland, some gusty winds.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online, and we're here with you until midday, full of today's biggest stories and lots of discussion as well.
Make sure you get in touch with your views as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the next hour, but first it is time for the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. We begin with some breaking news. 2 people have been charged with conspiring to arrange the travel of a child into the UK to harvest organs. A 60-year-old man and 55-year-old woman, both from Nigeria, have been remanded in custody. They'll appear at Uxbridge Magistrates Court later. Unions and train operators have resumed their talks to try and resolve the dispute over pay and conditions. Tens of thousands of rail workers have walked off the job for the second time this week, causing major travel disruption across the country. 1 in 5 trains are running today, and they're mostly restricted to main lines. The government's already announced it's planning to change the law to allow agency staff to fill in for striking workers. The RMT's Assistant General Secretary John Leach told GB News the current offer needs to be improved.
I'm going in anticipation and hope that they're going to put a proper and decent offer on the table. But the thing is, let's talk about what is on the table. 2%, job insecurity, thousands of job cuts, ticket office closures, new contracts, fire and rehire. That's not on. They've got to have a complete reset. And more importantly, probably than anything else, the government have got to get behind the railway men and women of this country and resource and give the authority to the management to negotiate a fair deal.
Well, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng says there is a fair offer on the table.
People who are striking, preventing kids from taking exams, preventing people from getting to work, should really actually look at what they're doing and actually, I think, come to some sort of reasonable arrangement. I don't think it's the case that the government has been unreasonable. I think the strikers are the ones who are being unreasonable.
Well, our reporter Rosie Wright is at Euston Station for us. Rosie, what's going on there?
Yeah, very good morning. Well, talks have been taking place between the RMT and Network Rail in the building just behind me. Now, some members of the RMT left. They gave no details of how those talks went, and they're going on to further negotiations with other train companies this afternoon. In the meantime, there are picket lines just like this across stations. And inside the station, a very quiet picture. About 6 trains running an hour, far from the normal schedule, and a few passengers waiting anxiously, most of them, to get onto their trains because they don't have seat reservations, saying things to me like, "We just will stand, we want to get on the train." So not chaos, calm, but we don't know what it was like inside the building behind me. Both sides staying firm. The RMT saying we want 7%, the offer on the table, as we know as it stands, just 3%.
Rosie, thank you. Rosie Wright, our reporter outside Euston Station for us there. The Prime Minister has hit back at critics of his plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, describing their attitude as condescending. Boris Johnson has now arrived in the capital, Kigali, for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. He's due to hold talks with the Prince of Wales, who's also in Rwanda, after he reportedly described the policy as appalling. The Prime Minister is expected to announce new trade deals and investment initiatives during his trip. 2 British men who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine are reportedly preparing to appeal their death sentences. Aidan Aslan, Sean Pinner and Moroccan national Brahim Sadoun were convicted by a Russian-backed court in the breakaway region of Donetsk. Sean Pinner's lawyer says if the appeal is dismissed, they'll request clemency. Meanwhile, the UK has announced a raft of new sanctions against Russia, which include a ban of exporting jet fuel and British banknotes. In Turkey, the Foreign Secretary accused Moscow of weaponising hunger with its blockade of Ukrainian grain. Liz Truss said if issues aren't resolved within a month, the global impact will be huge. She says the UK and Turkey will work together to get the grain out of Ukraine.
This is a moment for strength, for commitment and unity. The United Kingdom and Turkey are working closely together to mitigate the consequences of Russia's war against Ukraine. This has to start with getting Ukraine's grain out. We cannot and we will not rest until Ukraine prevails.
Afghan authorities are still struggling to reach a remote area after yesterday's earthquake, which killed at least 1,000 people. 1,500 others were injured as the 6.1 magnitude quake struck, destroying homes in the eastern part of the country. It's the deadliest earthquake to hit Afghanistan in 2 decades. The United Nations calling for financial aid and urging world leaders to provide humanitarian support. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Mercy and Bev.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. And we're here for another hour with a great show ahead. So here's what's coming up.
Almost 50 police officers were investigated over their failures to protect the children of Rotherham from child sexual abuse, but not one of them lost their job over it. That's the grim reality of the investigation into the South Yorkshire police force failures. We're going to be discussing that soon.
Very harrowing stuff. And 6 years on from the Brexit vote, we catch up with one of the founders of Vote Leave to see if he thinks everything is going to plan. Get in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Tell us what you think about Brexit 6 years on.
And finally, abortion rates are at the highest level on record in the United Kingdom due to accessible at-home medication, making the process much easier. But are there other factors accounting for this rise? And should we be concerned? We talk to women's health experts later.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. And as I said, we'd love to hear your views. We'll try and get to as many as we can in the final hour. And gbviews at gbnews.uk is that email.
That's right, but first of all, Mercy gives her views on that abortion story. A quick warning that this will include sensitive material.
Now, new abortion figures came out just a couple of days ago that reveal a trend I personally find quite troubling. But let me share a story before I get into all that. On this month, 8 years ago, my life changed. I got pregnant, unplanned, at 18. To say I was not ready for a child is an understatement. I had just finished my A-levels. I was working a part-time job on the high street. I was living in my mum's council flat, not to mention I was planning to head off to London for uni 3 months later. Hardly ideal, is it? But because of a series of very coincidental events that took place that I won't go into now, I did not have an abortion. The day I went to my 12-week scan and saw my daughter, only around 7 centimetres long at the time, on that ultrasound screen, there was no turning back for me. 8 years later, and she's over 4 foot tall. My, how they grow. So, on the 19th of February 2015, I, with my big sister by my side, delivered a healthy baby girl, my daughter Rosalind, at 4:25 a.m. in the morning. 7 pounds, 10 ounces of pure and utter joy. And on that day, everything I'd ever thought about abortion was thrown into question. I became wary of just how casually we treat abortions here in the UK and how normalised abortion is becoming. It haunted me how things could have been very different, how just because I didn't feel ready or able, I could have walked into my GP the day I found out I was pregnant and booked in for an abortion. Of course, it's more complicated than that. My daughter would have never existed, or more precisely, she would have existed, but I just would have taken away her life for what were, let's be honest, selfish reasons on my part. Now, let's go back to that newly published data from the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. It shows that the number of abortions in England and Wales during 2021 were at their highest ever since the procedure was legalised through the 1967 Abortion Act. I'll be honest, this very much concerns me. Whilst I'm not in favour of an unequivocal ban on terminations, I do think our current abortion laws are arbitrary and often cruel. And that might be an unpopular opinion, but it's my opinion and one I hold firmly. So why do I think this? Well, for starters, the 24-week abortion limit is far too high, I believe. And this is a view that a quarter of people in the country also hold, although it's fair to say 4 in 10 do think the 24-week limit is just about right. That's according to YouGov anyway. But here's a fact. 60% of babies born at 24 weeks survive in the UK. A 24-week-old fetus is a viable human being with a real chance of survival, a real chance of going on to live a life of its own. And with survival rates like that, which modern science will only improve, the 24-week cut-off point becomes an arbitrary deadline for death. Why does a 24-week, one-day-old baby deserve to survive, but a baby born 2 days earlier doesn't? It simply doesn't stack up. It's not morally justifiable, in my opinion. In fact, a boy from Alabama, Curtis Means, who was born at 21 weeks, set the world record late last year for being the most premature baby ever to survive. For our TV viewers, you can see his cute little self holding his world record certificate there. Well, he weighed just 420 grams when he was born. That's less than 2 blocks of butter. Was he not really a human? Because that's what pro-abortion activists say about unborn babies. And make no mistake, there are those who want to see that 24-week deadline lifted altogether. It wasn't so long ago that Labour MP Diana Johnson tabled an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill, which would have made abortion on demand for any reason legal up to birth. The second thing is that the Abortion Act allows unborn babies with disabilities to be aborted after the 24 weeks. Now, Down syndrome campaigner Heidi Carter took this to the High Court to try and get it overturned, but she sadly failed. Mrs. Carter, who is now happily married, said this: "I don't like to have to justify my existence. It makes me feel like I'm not as valuable as anyone else. It makes me feel like I shouldn't be here." Quite right. So I asked this question as well. Why is a baby with Down syndrome or other disabilities worth less than a baby without? Look, the top reason for women getting an abortion, and this is the case across many countries, are socioeconomic concerns. That's according to clinical research. For example, this accounts for nearly a third of abortions in women under 25 in America. According to one study, they say their reason for getting an abortion was because of socioeconomic concerns. Now, of course, women choose abortions for many other reasons as well. They don't want more children, perhaps. They have no family support. They have children and don't want more children. They feel it would risk their physical or mental health. The reasons are endless, and I get that. My only point is this. There are those who think that any reason at all is a good enough reason for babies to be aborted, and I simply don't agree. In fact, I think only a very limited number of reasons are morally and scientifically justified. Any woman who finds herself unexpectedly pregnant should not feel like she has to have an abortion because of lack of support, social or economic. And this is where I actually think the state needs to step in. In fact, I would happily pay more taxes to give women the help they need to raise unplanned children. And you definitely won't hear me offering to pay more taxes for much, I can assure you. Look, the lives of unborn babies, in my view, should be taken far more seriously. And until they are, I would go as far as saying that thousands of babies have their lives taken away in vain. Well,
I totally disagree.
Something tells me you disagree. Your
I
facial
disagree.
expression.
No,
Okay,
listen, beautifully articulated, and I think your story is really interesting, and I applaud your power to have taken control of that situation, and I'm sure you have a beautiful daughter. I think the only thing that for me was missing from that monologue was enough concern for the mother, and I would, or the woman. I would always put the woman, the living adult who has to give carry a baby for 40 weeks, give birth and raise that child for the rest of their life. Their needs have to be the priority at all time, because asking someone to do that when they don't want to is asking too much of any human being. This is before we start talking about the fact that men should also be involved in this conversation and that journey.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't fancy it is not a great reason. Don't get me wrong, I didn't want a baby at 18. I mean, as I mentioned, I was absolutely in no position to be having a baby at 18. It completely obliterated my social life. It's been incredibly difficult as a single parent. I didn't want to do that, but that's not good enough reason, in my opinion. You know, you do the crime, you do the time in a way, in my opinion. And yes, there are caveats. Obviously, there's cases of rape, there's cases of incest, things like that. And that's why I wouldn't ban it outright. But I just think, you know, people give these reasons that I don't feel are morally justified for killing a human being.
Whatever reason a woman gives would be enough for me. Whatever that woman's personal journey. It's such a big thing. I've got 3. And actually, interestingly, from these latest statistics from last year, 57% of those terminations were already mothers. Now, that's probably to do with lockdown conditions. You know, I do think it's really interesting what the social situation has been to see this increase. You know, if you're already a mother and you just feel you can't cope because you can't give enough time, love, resources to the children that you have, then not having another one has to be the right thing, whatever the circumstances.
That's an environmental problem, not in the sense of the environment, but, you know, mothers need more support. I absolutely believe that. They need, you know, mothers who are middle class and mothers need mental support.
It takes a village.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I just think if that was made clear to so many people and the support was increased, women, a lot of women, not all, but a lot would feel like actually they are capable of raising their children and they can give more time and they will be financially okay if they have that child. I don't think any mother should be put in a position where she feels that if she won't be able to support her baby if she gives it birth, and that becomes the only reason that she then has an abortion.
Absolutely. So, you know, so many people are having babies later. Their parents aren't necessarily even alive. Sometimes mum isn't around to help, grandma, whatever. But yeah, very interesting. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, look, civil disagreement. Let us know. You might completely disagree with everything I've just said. Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, we're talking about children, of course. We can agree that children are the most important thing for us to protect, I think. And this story is therefore, for that reason, incredibly distressing. And many of you will find this distressing. More than 1,400 girls, some as young as 11, were groomed, abused, raped and trafficked in the South Yorkshire town of Rotherham over the course of 16 years. And that's a conservative estimate, according to investigators who say the true number of victims could be much higher.
But despite 47 police officers being investigated over their failures to protect these girls, not one of them has been held accountable for the routine dismissal, ignorance or belittling of the sex crimes being committed against Rotherham's children.
Yes, well, the final report from the Independent Office for Police Conduct, released yesterday, concluded that the South Yorkshire Police Force failed to protect vulnerable children. It said there were examples of the police, quote, seeing children and young people as consenting to their exploitation, with a police culture that did not always recognise survivors as victims.
So here to discuss more is Billy Howarth of Parents Against Grooming UK. He's the founder of a Rochdale anti-grooming group. Rochdale, of course, the scene of a similar child sex abuse ring. Thank you so much for joining us. How do you feel now that this report is out, now that we're talking about it on the mainstream media, we're shining a light on the injustice? Does it feel like some sort of a vindication for you, Billy?
It certainly does. It's something I've been shouting about for a long time now, that these police forces around the country are doing this, blaming the abuse for their own abuse. It's widespread.
To what extent do you think this is still going on, Billy?
This is still massive. There's been no changes. We're told by the establishment that the landscape of safeguarding the children has changed since 2012 with what happened here in Rochdale. Yet we're seeing week after week after week more cases becoming before the courts. Cases from 10, 15 years ago. We've got another case in Rochdale now where 8 men are up before the courts waiting to go on trial from that same time as the Rotherham scandal.
Is it a fitting consequence for the police officers involved here and for the men involved in doing this? What's the right consequence of all of this? Because there doesn't seem to be many.
There's been zero accountability across the UK. I find it hard to believe that so many cases, you've got Rochdale, Rotherham, Telford, Oldham, and there's many, many more. But these are the ones that I've worked on, so the ones I can talk about. Not one person of authority has been held to account for all these abuse cases. Like they said, there's 1,400 girls was named in Rotherham, over 1,400 children that could have been possibly abused. We need to dig back and go back to the cause of this. We need to scale it back and find out, well, who allowed this to happen? And it all stems back to one person, doesn't it? And the memo that he sent when he was Prime Minister, which is Gordon Brown, he sent a memo to councils all across the UK. He sent a memo across to police stations and fellow politicians all across the UK to say these girls' chaotic lifestyles were the reason for their own abuse. That then allowed thousands of children across the UK to be abused. That's accountable action.
Gosh, that's a huge allegation to make.
It's public. It's for public information. It's not me just making up. It's there. Everyone knows that this memo was sent.
And I just lost your audio for a second there, Billy. And so you're saying this is a memo that was from Gordon Brown
when he was a serving Prime Minister.
Saying what? Sorry.
That these girls' chaotic lifestyles were the reason for their own abuse.
Their chaotic lifestyles were the reason for their own abuse.
Yeah,
OK, obviously Gordon Brown isn't here to defend himself against that. And you would say, what is the problem? Is it the culture of seeing these girls as not being valuable in those particular communities?
I think it plays a part in this, but the understanding that they're not going to get in trouble, they're going to get away with it because they're well known. I'm going to use Shabir Ahmed, the Rochdale gang leader, as an example here. This man wasn't just a groomer; he was a welfare officer for Oldham Social Services.
Oh yeah, that's a shocking
story. He had access to the most vulnerable of children in the Greater Manchester. The most vulnerable, he had full access to, and he was the leader of a grooming gang.
Wow. Yeah, and of course he is imprisoned now for that. But you would argue that, OK, some penalties have been given out to those who have been found guilty of crimes, but you think there should be more action taken against individual police officers as opposed to the force in general?
I said it last time I was on, that one of the problems is having a politician as a police and crime commissioner. It's a massive issue because they're not trained in the ways of the police. A policeman needs to be a police and crime commissioner. We've got politicians who are out of the debt. Andy Burnham out of his debt.
Well, look, Billy Howarth, thank you so much for joining us of Parents Against Grooming UK, which is he's the founder. It campaigns against grooming gangs. Do you know what? Sometimes I just think we completely do not punish people who abuse children in this country.
Love a bit of northern straight talk.
Way. I think we should lock them all up and throw away. I really, really believe this. I know some people might say it's extreme. But as soon as you abuse a child, as soon as you're abusing multiple children in this way, you're not fit to live in society. I will never trust you around my child, and I don't know anybody who would trust these people around their children. Life sentences for all child abusers. That's my manifesto, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, after the break, 6 years on from the Brexit vote that rocked the UK, is everything going as planned? We'll be discussing this after the weather.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:26. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning. Tell your mates.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're going to go to some of your views first. Lots of you getting in touch. We've spoken about loads today. We've spoken about strikes. We've spoken about sex education, abortion, Brexit. We've got it all going on today. I gave my views on abortion not long ago. They're nuanced views, I think, but I'm largely against. I think we should take abortion much more seriously. This is, of course, in light of abortion figures showing they're at their highest ever. Shirley here says, our beautiful 15-year-old granddaughter was born out for 24 weeks. She's clever, pretty, and has her whole life ahead of her, thanks to the fantastic care given at Nottingham City Hospital. I don't object to abortion, but not as a means of birth control, and believe the date should be reduced to 6 weeks.
I don't think there are very many women who use abortion as birth control. I just really don't think that's something that is considered. Believe me, I've met a lot of women. I'd never met a woman who would say.
No, I think it's a crude way of putting it. But I do certainly think there's lots of young women who perhaps aren't as careful as they would be. I know this from experience, especially growing up, who aren't as careful as they would be because of the availability of abortion. They know that any point they want to, they can go and get one, of course, within that 24-week period.
One of the theories on why this figure was high from last year is, of course, people couldn't access their normal GP surgeries, and so they couldn't get coils replaced or get their prescriptions for their pills because the chemist was closed, or they were homeschooling children, couldn't leave the children at home to go and get their prescriptions, blah, blah, blah. So I think we have to bear in mind that there were some practical issues which have had long-lasting consequences.
But the pill has now, or the abortion pill, I forget the full name of the medication, but it was available for delivery at home, whereas it wasn't before the pandemic. So you could actually sort of have an abortion at home. I think before the 10-week period, that medication works.
Yeah.
Now the bills come in and access come in that allows women to access that even after the pandemic. So women can now have abortions.
Good.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree.
Put our own health and our own well-being in our own hands as much as possible.
Well, if you take that perspective, though, once you're a mother, for me, you're a mother as soon as you've got a baby growing inside you.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You're a mother when you've got a baby in your hands.
Surely.
Until that point, you are an incubator.
So, oh gosh, is that what you call yourself when you were pregnant?
Biologically, that's what you're doing. You are incubating a potential life. But again, I just think we have to. The slippery slope is where you prioritise the fetus over the mother, and therein lies a nightmare scenario whereby women are just incubators as opposed to human beings.
Well, that's our views. We will get to more of yours very shortly. But for now, let's take you through some of the other stories that you might have missed of the day we thought you might be interested in. Let's kick off.
OK, so the Queen has started to sell. She must be hitting hard times like everybody else. Maybe she can't meet her electricity bill. The Queen has started to sell handcrafted walking sticks at her Sandringham estate. We know she's pretty fond of using Prince Philip's when she's seen out and about.
Yes,
so there they are.
Yeah, for our radio viewers, we're showing some nice, lovely handcrafted walking sticks. Well, they're priced at £55 in the royal shops, and they're each made from locally sourced wood. And the walking sticks have been described as, quote, artefacts, and they come in different sizes, lengths and shapes. So every single one is unique with an iconic stag horn on top. I wouldn't care what it looks like. If the Queen's had anything to do with it, I'd pay more than £55.
Made of ash. I mean, it just say the Queen's making them herself.
Oh, no, she's selling them. The Sandringham Royal Shop is selling them.
She's not making. No, she's not whittling them.
But if they've got anything to do with the Queen, £55 is a bargain. I think. I don't even need a walking stick, and I'm happy to buy one for that price. Now, next one, as commuters face yet another day of delays amid rail strikes chaos, one man has found a novel way to work and avoid crowded stations at the same time by kayaking down the river. I didn't even know you could do this.
Oh, this is brilliant. So this is George Bullard. He paddled down the River Lug on his £74 blow-up watercraft to get to his office in mid-Wales, meaning he's no longer got to worry about the rising cost of fuel or ongoing rail strikes. You can't see this if you're listening on the radio. It's a big inflatable yellow and black boat, the kind of things you can buy from those kind of sports stores. He's a keen kayaker. The 33-year-old camping firm director estimate... Oh, funnily enough, he runs a camping firm. I imagine they sell inflatable boats to get you to work. He estimates that his savvy commute has saved him thousands. He says the kayak is a great form of transport. He can just deflate it and put it in his backpack, he said, creating the most fantastic advertising for his company.
Yeah, well, it's a great mode of transport across the channel as well, it would seem.
I've got one of them. Oh, mercy, making it political.
After the break, we're going to be talking about abortion. We've got two great guests on that. The UK has hit a record number of abortions. Of course, there's that easy-to-take at-home pill that might be having an impact. We're going to be looking at that in just a moment after these headlines.
It's 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Two people have been charged with conspiring to arrange the travel of a child into the UK to harvest organs. A 60-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman, both from Nigeria, have been remanded in custody. They're due to appear at Uxbridge Magistrates Court. The child has been taken into care. The Met Police is being investigated over the way it handled its inquiry into serial killer Stephen Port's victims. It follows a 2021 inquest which found police failures probably contributed to the deaths of 3 of the 4 men. Scotland Yard has acknowledged the failings and says it will offer every support to the new inquiry. Unions and train operators have resumed their talks to try and resolve the dispute over pay and conditions. Tens of thousands of rail workers have walked off the job for the second time this week, causing major travel disruption across the country. 1 in 5 trains are running today, and they're mostly restricted to main lines. The Prime Minister, who's arrived in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, has hit back at critics of his plan to send asylum seekers to the country, describing their attitude as condescending. He's due to hold talks with the Prince of Wales after he reportedly described the policy as appalling. The Prime Minister is also expected to announce new trade deals and investment initiatives during his trip. 2 British men who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine are reportedly preparing to appeal their death sentences. Aidan Aslin, Sean Pinner and Moroccan national Brahim Sadoum are convicted by a Russian-backed court in the breakaway region of Donetsk. Sean Pinner's lawyer says if the appeal is dismissed, they'll request clemency. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.226 US and 1.161 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,500 and 45 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning. It's 11:37 and this is To The Point with me, Matthew Moroki, and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Now, we're going to dig a little deeper into the topic you've heard us talking about already this morning, and Mercy did that fantastic monologue. New data from the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities reveals that abortion rates in the UK have hit a record high, with more than 214,000 terminations taking place in England and Wales last year.
Yes, well, more than half of these took place at home, with the pandemic paving the way for a pills-by-post solution for women unable to see their doctors, but who still wanted to access early medical abortions.
The abortion rate was highest last year for women aged 22. But what does this data tell us about the situation around women's health and the issue of abortion in this country?
Yes, well, joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Larissa Corder, an obstetrician and gynaecologist, and Anne Furedi, the former CEO of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service and author of book for the Moral Case for Abortion. Thank you both so much for joining us. Let's start with you. You know, moral case for abortion sounds a bit controversial to many people, Anne. Just tell us, in summary, what that moral case is.
Well, I think that when it comes to abortion, somebody has got to make a decision. And I think it's absolutely right and proper that it's the pregnant woman who makes her own decision about the future of the pregnancy. And it's absolutely wrong, morally wrong, for someone else to step in and try and make that decision on her behalf. And I think the growth in the number that we've seen here is simply due to the fact that abortion services have improved, stigma about abortion has reduced, and more women are able to use it. And that's ultimately a good thing. It's their choice.
Yeah, can I just quickly ask, when you say nobody else's opinion should be sort of above the woman's, does that include the father as well?
Well, the pregnancy is in a woman's body. It's unfortunate in a way that there's no kind of democracy when it comes to carrying a fetus. And I think the experience shows that the vast majority of women really take into account what their partner thinks about it. But ultimately, it's her choice. And I would say, if I can, that the image that you've just shown of a pregnant woman's belly in no way represents the stage of pregnancy that most of these abortions are taking place at, which is very, very early on.
Yeah, I think the figure is over 90% or somewhere around
98%.
there, before 10 weeks. Is the case. Well, look, Dr. Larissa, let's go to you. Just give us an overview of what you feel about the issue.
Sure. So I think that having access to abortion care is vitally important in all of our societies. And if we look at what's going on in the United States at the moment, it really drives home that sort of profound realization how much we need this care to be provided for women. And during the pandemic, when the only option we really had was to provide these services at home. That was something that really did benefit a huge number of women. Now that we've decided to continue that, I have mixed views about it, really, though I absolutely agree that, women should be allowed to have this access at home if they want to, and they'll be better emotionally supported there. My concerns are to do with the fact that these abortion rates are rising, and I think what they reflect, in addition, and something that's not really being taken into account, is the fact that we're dealing with a massive cost of living crisis where many men and women realise they simply can't afford to have children. They're not being given proper maternity, paternity leave to be able to look after them. There's a disproportionate burden on women to look after children. That's always been the case. But we've seen during the pandemic just how undervalued women's childcare, really, the childcare that women provide really is. And that hasn't improved. And I sort of feel we live and exist in quite a misogynistic society that doesn't really make adequate provisions for women to make the best decision by themselves. And there's also a real lack of access to contraception, which women might need to use as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on here that isn't really necessarily being reflected. And also, in addition, as a doctor, my concern is that we're not properly screening women here in terms of who is able to have an abortion at home and who really should come into hospital. So, for example, we might be missing ectopic pregnancies. That's where you're pregnant outside of the uterus. And I've sadly seen as a doctor some women who've taken these pills at home coming later to hospital, with their lives under threat because the pills haven't treated the ectopic pregnancy. They haven't been scanned. They don't know that they have an ectopic pregnancy, and actually that presents a dangerous situation for the woman. And secondly, that some of these cases might actually be further along than 10 weeks, and a woman simply might not realise. So if she takes these pills at home and aborts much later, that can be incredibly distressing. And finally, we might be missing cases of domestic violence and coercion here. So sometimes as a doctor, when a woman comes to see me, I can pick up on some really subtle signs that potentially, that woman, her life might be in danger, that she's not being safeguarded, she might have been trafficked. And we simply won't have, if this is all taking place at home, we won't have a situation where I'm able to assess that. So I just think it needs better planning, better screening, and to ensure this isn't just done for convenience, but is, that we keep women safe.
Yeah. Thank you, Larissa. I want to bring you back, Anne, because I know, of course, with you working for the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, you, I imagine, see this as a balance, correct, between the freedom of the woman to take this measure at home whilst also protecting her health. Do you agree that we're not quite getting it right?
Well, I think it's difficult to get right because the point is the doctors often tend to look at what they want to do to provide a service, and they forget that sometimes what they want out of a service, for example, all of the opportunities to talk about other things, isn't what the woman wants at the actual time. And I absolutely agree that there's another image of a very late pregnancy which has nothing to do with abortion. But anyway, putting that to one side, you have to understand that women often feel that this is a private decision that they want to make for themselves about the rightness or the wrongness of continuing the pregnancy. And then if they feel that they want to engage with a doctor, then that's a choice that they should make. And of course, more women could do with more support in a wanted pregnancy. I completely agree that maternity leave is rubbish. But when it comes to making the ultimate decision, that has to be the woman's choice and nobody else's.
And can I just ask you, at what point for you personally is it morally justifiable to abort a fetus? Do you have a cut-off point, or do you think actually the choice aspect sort of trumps it? I'm trying to get an idea of what you think.
Well, I think you're going to hate what I say now, but you see, the problem with having a very firm cut-off, as we have in the law, is a very unsubtle instrument. So at the moment, there's a cut-off at 23 weeks and 6 days of pregnancy. And in reality, a woman who is 23 weeks and 5 days is no different. She's not in any different situation to a woman who is 24 weeks and 1 day. And so that's why I think that hard time limits really don't work terribly well, and that what's needed is a discussion at that point between the woman and her doctor, who can thoroughly understand the circumstances that she's in and who also will be engaged in the abortion. The people who I don't think are in a very good position to make those decisions are politicians who probably know nothing about these very complicated circumstances. And the reason why I keep drawing attention to the inappropriateness of the images is that, you know, the number of women who request abortion very, very late in pregnancy are, you know, it's vanishingly small, because no one knows better than a woman at these later stages what pregnancy feels like, the fetal movement. And, you know, the reason why the overwhelming majority of abortions are in very early pregnancy is because women don't want them later on. They don't need the law to regulate the circumstances. You know, we are really capable of weighing up the issues that we have in our lives and making nuanced judgments about them.
Larissa, can I ask you, there's an argument, of course, to say, well, women have access to contraception now. There should be no excuses to anyone ever having an abortion because we can just go and get the pill, we can have the coil, there are condoms, you name it. And therefore, we should just not have access to abortion. Just respond to that, because that's something that we often hear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree that absolutely all women have access to adequate contraception. I think that we need to have a separate discussion about that, especially, during the pandemic and coming out of that. But also, abortions take place for many different reasons. And I think that the common misperception myth is that women, have abortions without much thought or regard and also have an abortion because, they've accidentally had unprotected sex and now they don't want the baby. That really is, the minority. For most women making that decision to have an abortion, I'm yet to meet a woman who hasn't found that really, really emotionally difficult and harrowing. It is always a complicated matter, and abortions take place for many different reasons, some of which are medical. Others are to do with looking after the woman socially, emotionally, mentally. There are so many different varied and nuanced reasons, as Anne also explains and talks about. So I think that it's really important that we appreciate that and that we actually look at, as I mentioned before, what's going on in the United States at the moment and the fact that abortion care is under serious threat and what that presents to women. And as a doctor also working in fertility care, that really concerns me, what's going on the other side of the Atlantic, because it has serious repercussions for those women as well. So, we need to understand that there are many complex reasons and we need to be able to support women and men in being able to make this judgment call and decision. But I completely agree with Anne that it should always be a decision that the woman makes and that she makes feeling empowered to make, not as a last desperate resort.
Absolutely. Well, it feels like we're in fairly safe hands. I'm so sorry, Anne, but we're in safe hands with women like you fighting our corner. So thank you very much, Dr. Larissa Corder, an obstetrician and gynaecologist, and Anne Faridi, the former CEO of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service and author of the book, The Moral Case.
I was going to tell Anne, though, that at least we agreed on one thing, which is that this 24 hard deadline is arbitrary. So we found some aspect of disagreement. But I would say, I do object to this. They don't speak for me, let's put it that way. Those women don't speak for me, and I think we shouldn't delegitimise or vilify women who are anti-abortion. I know there are some, American aspects who are a bit crazy when it comes to this debate. Quite extreme, sort of Republican, evangelical Christian types who,
would say women should give birth under any circumstances, even under rape or incest or with extreme fetal abnormalities.
Yeah, and they ruin the argument, I think, for people who take a more nuanced approach to it, like me.
Well, you've heard both sides. That's what we do here at GB News.
Well, now it's Refugee Week, apparently, this week, and we're, of course, going to bring attention back to the refugee crisis in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainian civilians have fled their homes to escape the war, carrying with them only the bare essentials for their uncertain journey ahead.
Sometimes, of course, this has meant leaving behind their family pets or not being able to bring the food and medicines that they may require. Well, UK-based animal charity Viva has stepped up to join its sister organisation, Viva Poland, to provide vital support to animals and their refugee owners caught in the crossfire of this devastating year.
Yes, well, here to tell us more is Juliet Galatli, who's the founder of Viva UK and Viva Poland. This is extraordinary what you do. I think anybody who owns a pet, we're a nation of pet owners here in the UK. Anyone who knows a pet knows how emotionally connected you can be to a pet and how much better it makes you feel in yourself. Explain to us what people have been going through in Ukraine when they've had to leave their pets at home.
I was in Poland recently and with Viva Poland at Western Station, where a lot of refugees are coming through, and it's very heartrending seeing people who literally have one small case. For example, I saw a grandma and a 10-year-old with them, and they just had their dog, free holding their little dog, and it was very clear that the most important thing that they were bringing out of Ukraine, was their dog, not their material belongings. And you see that all day long. We were talking to refugees who'd been through hell. I spoke to two young women who barely had any luggage again, but they'd been carrying their little Yorkshire Terrier in a backpack for about 15 days before they even got to this station, and still had a long journey to make. So, like you just said, cats and dogs and other animals are part and parcel of the family. So to lose your animal on top of losing everything else would just be horrendous. And people recognise that. In fact, for the first time ever, the Red Cross actually raised the status of pets, saying they were as important to get out as other things in this crisis, because there's this recognition that we love our animals, they're part and parcel of our family. So yeah, there's been some very harrowing scenes of animals that have been abandoned for one reason or another, sometimes no fault whatsoever of the people who just don't know what's going on. There was one case where there was a dog that had gone blind, and his owner had died in the war and was being fed outside a grocery store, who stood no chance when they started bombing. And one of our volunteers managed to get that dog across the border. And that's just one example. There are obviously many, many examples of things like this happening.
So tell us, Juliet, what do you specifically do, and what do Viva do in that situation? What are the challenges you have to face?
So the big challenge was logistics, actually, because it wasn't so much a problem in getting pet feed for all these sanctuaries that were being deluged in the Ukraine with lots of cats and dogs. It was the problem of getting the feed across to the Ukraine because of the fuel in the Ukraine, and literally asking people, when the war started, asking people to risk their lives to get to these places. So we've been working with Ukrainian organisations that obviously know the Ukraine best. But what we've been doing is logistics and getting hundreds of tons of pet food across the Ukraine border so that they can then take it on to where it's most needed. That's one thing. The other thing, when the war started and in the first few weeks, a lot of what we were doing was helping cats and dogs that were coming across the border. That's getting harder and harder to do because the Polish authorities are clamping down so much on that. But for example, we just rescued 14 dogs that no other sanctuary wanted. They went out through Hungary in a long way round, being days in a cage, and they're very large dogs. Nobody wanted them. So we're doing things like we have a sanctuary, which is about an hour from Warsaw, and we've taken about 150 cats and dogs into the sanctuary. We've got an animal behaviourist for those 14 dogs because they're aggressive and they've been through hell.
Julia, we do have, unfortunately, we do have to end it there, but we absolutely will have you back. And just very quickly, how can people get in touch if they want to help?
viva.org.uk/Ukraine.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. We'll have you on again. Well, that is it from us here at To The Point. But don't go away. Up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piero, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A hot one for some today. Downpours in other places. Hit and miss thunderstorms developing through the day today, particularly across England and Wales. Weather front up to the far north, but it's actually this one approaching from France that's bringing more clouds and some heavy showers. We've already seen a few, but we're going to see more of them developing this afternoon as the heat really gets going, particularly over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast initially, but spreading into Wales and then later on into northern England. Southwest England also susceptible to some heavy downpours. Hit and miss, so not everywhere seeing them, far from it, but where they do occur, torrential rain, large hail likely. The highest temperatures today across northern England, North Wales, could get close to 30 Celsius. Mostly dry for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a bit of cloud here, but some sunny spells coming through. And then through the evening, the chance of those thundery showers working further north. So we'll see more of them this evening over northern England, spreading into parts of Scotland. Some heavy rain likely here through the night. So downpours further south tending to ease. Quite a warm, quite a humid night. Quite a lot of cloud around as well, but misty in places. And generally a cloudier day on Friday with a continued risk of some showers. The overnight ones clearing away from northern Scotland, but we'll see more developing, I think, during tomorrow, particularly over the Midlands, southwest England, but also moving up into northeast England during the afternoon. Again, not everywhere seeing the downpours, but there will be some heavy ones around, the risk of hail and thunder. In the sunny spells, mid-20s across the east, but turning cooler further west with more persistent rain for Northern Ireland, moving in by the end of Friday. Wales and southwest England seeing some heavy rain for a time late on Friday as well. And that line of rain is a cold front which swings across all areas, tied into this area of low pressure, which will bring plenty of showers in western areas this weekend and a much cooler feel, with particularly across Northern Ireland, some gusty winds.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat, naked cow.